I'm very honored to welcome Judge Patricia Broderick to Politics and Prose bookstore. Just do a little spiel. Yeah, Judge Broderick will be discussing her new memoir, Reinventing the Wheel, Hard Roads Can Lead to Beautiful Places. After a life-changing car accident as a teenager, she had two choices: remain in the safe haven of her parents or reinvent herself and find a new path through life as a woman in a wheelchair. From her journey through law school and up through the courts to become a senior judge with the District of Columbia, she continues her advocacy for diversity and women's advancement in the legal profession. She'll be in conversation with Julia Malone, a longtime journalist who has covered the courts, the White House, Capitol Hill, and is a member of the Washington Gridiron Club. So please join me in welcoming Judge Patricia Broderick and Julia Malone to Politics and Prose.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah, it looks like I get a little bit of time to ask questions of someone that I happen to know very, very well. We've been friends and traveling companions, and I know a whole lot about her. And
She lives to talk about it. She survived traveling with me.
So I will not divulge all the secrets, but there is an awful lot to see and to read about in this book that I have witnessed, and I can tell you these ideas are exactly what works in her life, and I hope that you too will be able to hear and see and read some of these ideas and see they do apply to everybody. So Patty, excuse me, that's what I call her, Judge Pat, you've been a long and very distinguished lawyer and now judge, and you could have written about a lot of subjects. Why did you pick this one for this book?
I think we have enough scholars opining on the other things. I really
Excuse
didn't
me just
have...
a minute. Can everybody hear Patty?
Okay. All right, is that better? Yes. Well, I guess so. I didn't have a need to write a book, but I did have a message that I wanted to get out. And the message was more personal. And I hope that it comes through in the book, because I really just try to use myself as a tool to get that message out. And that message is basically that people who are different should not be treated as if they're any less. That the level of low expectations we experience is really daunting. And I wanted people to understand that they didn't realize they were doing that, but they're doing that. And I wanted the people who are different, who feel that they are different, to understand that they had a choice, that they don't have to accept what people say they are. They can choose to be who they want to be, and they can choose joy. So that's why I decided to write that kind of book.
Yes, and I would say that does come out in the book quite clearly. You had a big transition to make. These, 50 years ago? How many years ago?
Do we have to go there?
No, we don't. That will be kept secret, but it was a while ago. And that way, and you learned to live you had an entirely different life from what you had had for your first number of years.
Such a good friend.
Most people would have said to you after that accident, "Oh, poor you." But you took a very different approach, and that is what I learned about some years ago. I won't say, when we began to travel together and be good friends. And in those years, there was no ADA. And especially not in places like South America, Venice. And so you decided that's where we should go. Mm-hmm. So you told me on that first trip we took together that this was your guide. This saying, as some of you may know, is from G.K. Chesterton. An adventure is only inconvenience rightly considered, and Inconvenience is only an adventure wrongly considered. Could you talk about that a bit?
Well, you know about some of our adventures. So, for example, when we were in Venice and the boat left us off at the wrong stop, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and there was no one around, and we were facing a whole bunch of steps that we had to get over, we decided to make it an adventure. So we told stories and talked and chatted and had a lovely time. And then two lovely men came walking up to the top of the bridge. And I looked up at them and I said, "Are you strong?" And they just grinned from ear to ear, and they couldn't have been nicer. And we laughed the whole way up the steps. So it was great.
And that is one of many such cases. One thing you've taught me is that people like to be asked to help.
It took me a while to accept that because for a while I had to prove, I thought to others, but really to myself, that I needed help, that some things I just can't do. Duh. So it took a while, but then I saw that people were really genuine. And so then I realized that the best thing to do was to explain to them how to help. Because I can't tell you some of the damage they have done trying to help. So, but it's lovely. It's lovely to see it in people's eyes and to see the kindness of strangers. And I mean, I took Paris by myself, and every time I got to a curb, I just looked around, and people came running, helping me up, helping me down. At one point, I had 4 people, one on each wheel, all trying to help. And people say the Parisians are so rude, but you just look in their eyes and their hearts melted, and you'd see others watching to make sure they got you up okay. It was just lovely.
Yeah, well, sometimes it wasn't that easy. You took some trips early on to the Far East into airports that had never seen a person by herself in a wheelchair in an airplane. And they just came to you and said, "Would you get out?" I'm just going to quote what you say in the book. You said, "Some of these experiences terrified me, but each time I survived, the relief sent a thrill buzzing through me, which made me braver and more willing to face the next obstacle." You remember those cases?
Oh, yeah. There were quite a few, unfortunately.
Which reminds me, we've talked about how you came out and you changed your life. Do you want to talk a little bit about the early times when you had to change from being a very able-bodied, 5'10" young woman and very active to become someone stuck in a wheelchair? And how did you make this transition?
Well, I don't call it stuck in a wheelchair because a wheelchair is my wheels, man. It's my legs. It's my way out. It's not my confinement. I think in the beginning you're just so busy surviving that you really don't think about it. You just want to know if you're going to get through to the next day. And for me, the really hard part was watching the pain in my parents' eyes. You know, that they watched me and they had all these fears for me, I could tell. And they were just really concerned and there every minute. And I just wanted to take some of their pain away. So that was my focus. And then, as things went along, each thing felt like a progress. And again, it was that same thrill of when you get out of a bad situation with the wheelchair. It's the same thing when you get to your next step of independence. It's always a thrill. The hard part is when you realize that there are no more next steps and that this is it. Because everybody thinks they're going to walk again. And it takes a while when you realize you're not.
And how did you confront that and
I think
Feels
that's
it.
when I really started traveling.
Ah,
And because every time I go off, there's wonderful new challenges. And when I come home to my lovely, totally accessible, wonderful apartment, life feels so easy that it just makes it all rewarding.
so how did this experience change your whole approach to your career?
It made me want to reach out to people more, to tell people that they should believe in themselves and have strength and not listen to all the naysayers, that they shouldn't be limited by other people's thoughts.
Right. Well, I was wondering, and I think we may have discussed this before, but do you believe that you would have become a lawyer, a prosecutor, someone checking out money laundering in various places around the world, and finally a federal judge? If you hadn't had this experience?
No, I believe I would be unhappily divorced and miserable.
Anyone interested in a date? I'll leave that to you to discuss that. But yeah, you had this really tough experience when it first happened. And then I've been thinking about it. It took a number of years. You had these other experiences. You excelled in your career, and you were urged to apply for judgeship in the Superior Court here in D.C. And first of all, you didn't realize that one has to kind of get backing and have people tell the White House what a good judge you would make. So you just expected them to go ahead and put you in line. That didn't turn out. This is Washington, and we're in Politics and Prose, so we're going to talk a little about politics, which, as it turns out, was very important in this next chapter of your life, which in some way I think kind of is the second most challenging one you had. Maybe you would agree. And so finally, you got actually appointed by the president. That would be 1996, I think. And nothing was happening because there was somewhere in the back room, there was politics. And no one would say what it was, and you'll never, I guess, know exactly what. You have some ideas, but there was no real reason to object to your being there. But some people wanted either somebody else or didn't want to please. It's politics. That's a shame, but that's the case. So you had this experience with trying to get even a hearing. There was no hearing. And you had this wonderful little experience with, I'm going to read a little of this because I like it so much. Okay, she said she finally got at least a meeting with some of the committee aides, right? And these staffers started asking these really tough questions. Here's one. Now, we hear you are extremely aggressive as a prosecutor. You're often in the witness's face, yelling and screaming at them. Well, she said, as a prosecutor, I consider myself assertive rather than aggressive. Men are praised for being aggressive, but when women are assertive, they are frequently called aggressive, and other names beginning with a B containing 5 letters. The female staffer chuckled as one of the men counted letters on his fingers. I must add, future Judge Pat said, I cannot yell. I am physically paralyzed from the chest down and cannot access the muscles required for a good yell or scream. But you probably would have liked to. Finally, the witness box is at least one step, if not more, up from floor level. There's no way I can physically reach the face of my witness. By the looks on their faces, I had made progress. My hearing date was finally scheduled, and get this, it was on the anniversary day of her paralyzing car accident. And this is what she thought that morning. It will be a grand day for me to receive my wings and soar. And she did. They tried to bully her into talking about a couple of cases that didn't go well, but she reminded them that she had had hundreds and 70 actual jury selection trials, and they were all very good. So
We didn't win them all.
do you want to say some more about this? Because I may be missing something you remember. Tell us.
Well, it was just so amazing. One of the other groups that interviewed me said that they heard that all my friends were going to be there in wheelchairs with placards protesting how long it took. I was like, well, I'm not sure who you're talking about. And apparently they left a lot of room in the back of the hearing room for my friends in wheelchairs. And I'm also brunette. They didn't leave anything for the brunettes, So it was very interesting. And also the hearing was in an area where there was no wheelchair accessible bathroom, which I also thought was very interesting.
So that very day, I guess they didn't. Then it went to the Senate for a confirmation.
Well, it had to go to committee for vote.
Oh, that's right.
And then it had to go to the Senate.
And then it took until the very last
Day of the term.
Otherwise, you would not have been confirmed. So.
Well, I still was reaching some problems, but Senator Harkin came to my aid, and he was just marvelous. And he spoke to the other members of the committee, and I personally interviewed on a Saturday morning early when nobody was there with Senator Carl Levin, and he was very interesting to talk to, very delightful. So there was a lot more pushing that had to be done. But, they think we people in wheelchairs are wimps, We didn't get here by being a wimp, I mean, if you want to keep deluding yourself to thinking that, you go right ahead. But one of my favorite shirts says, go ahead, underestimate me. That'll be fun.
That's great. Oh, so you were confirmed, and you were sworn into your new job on the same day, and they must have put you right to work. Do you think your experience in a wheelchair has changed the way or affected the way you deal with some defendants? And how some defendants deal with you?
Absolutely, because as a person in a wheelchair, I've been patted on the head. I mean, I came out of customs with the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury on a trip, and I got patted on the head. And people just pat you on the shoulder and stop you and say, "You're so brave." And I just knew what it felt like to be treated differently. And I knew that a lot of people had that experience. I mean, we're all different in some way. That's what makes it all wonderful and unique and special. It certainly would be boring if we were all the same. So I just felt that I needed to appreciate that in each person. So I always nodded or said hello to every person who came before me and acknowledged them, said good day, and let them know that they would be heard and respected.
And speaking of dealing with people, it's you're in a wheelchair, you're wheeling down the street. It's very different from one of us just walking down the street, and you're noticed. You're noticed a lot. One thing I know how much you love this. When you're traveling in the airplane, you're the first one in, so that's good. You sit down and nobody's watching. But when the airplane lands, everybody gets off, and then you get off. So it's you're noticed.
No bathroom.
That's right.
Now, they say that they have a little wheelchair that they can put you in and take you to the bathroom. So I tried it once. So I asked them for the chair. There was a big announcement. Everybody, please stay out of the aisles while the woman in the bath goes to the bathroom. Then they left me alone, and I was supposed to tell them when I was done, but there was nobody to tell because they continued to leave me alone. And this was not a wheelchair you could wheel yourself. And then, of course, when it was time to return my seat, everybody please stay in their seats so the woman in the wheelchair can get back from the bathroom.
Yeah, and it didn't just then. I mean, all the time you're watched more. And do you get used to that? How do you deal with it? And when you're just confronting the public on a daily basis?
Well, I just use it as an opportunity to meet people and try to get them to, if I can get them to laugh and see the absurdity of the situation, it can change a mind. And if you can change your mind, you've made progress. So I take it as a challenge.
I've observed that too.
Well, she was with me in Uruguay when I got a flat tire.
Yeah, let me tell you what, when you have a flat tire and you're in a wheelchair, you ain't going nowhere. And we had to wait until and it was a very nice hotel guy. Didn't he go into a bicycle shop and get us a
They
new
took my
tire?
wheel. Left me in the lounge on a nice chair and snapped off my wheel and took it away.
So I have just a few more questions before I open the floor for anyone else who want to think about your questions. One thing I would say, in your travels, and travel was an important thing for you even before you were in the wheelchair, you've collected quite a few friends. Do you think you collect more because of the wheelchair than you did before?
I think so, because early in my time as a wheelchair, I realized finally that there were times when I would need help, and of course I didn't like that. So I decided to try to make it fun. So instead of saying, "Would you please open the door?" I'd say, "Hey, catch that door for me, will ya?" And it turned out to be more fun, and so I started meeting people that way,
Yeah.
and it was great.
And another thing I noticed, if you read the book, you will see there are a lot of humor in it. Some of it is poked at yourself. How important is that in your life?
Oh, essential.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was raised with humor, which is great. I mean, my parents had some really bad times and some really good times, but they laughed through all of them.
Is there advice that you can give able-bodied folk about how to be friends with someone, or how to help or not help? Or I remember I had to learn when not and when to push the wheelchair, and never to say, ugh.
Yeah, I do have some people who like to grab it, and all of a sudden you're wondering why you're going so fast. And then they let go. And they don't tell you they've let go. And there are no sensors you're saying, they've let go. So all of a sudden you're wondering why we're steering into that lawn. So I would just say, when I went to law school the first year, I was the first person in a wheelchair there. The second year, another person in a wheelchair came, and everyone came up to me and said, "What do we say to him?" And I was like, "Try hello." The next thing I would say is, if you don't know, ask. You should not be expected to know. It's my job to tell you what I need. And if I don't tell you and I get mad at you, that's my problem. Because I need to tell you what I need. I can't expect you to know. And one day I may need your help, and another day I may not. So it's my job to tell you, and if you want to know, you ask.
You often call in fact, your book sort of indicates that you're on a journey. And you say others can join that journey. What can you say to them? How do they join that journey? How do they go along for the ride?
And they just begin to love themselves, be happy in their own skin, be grateful for everything we have. I mean, whoever thought being in a wheelchair would be a good thing? But I have met so many people and had felt so much love, and people go out of their way to give me good experiences. One guy bungee corded me to a motorcycle and took me all around. Someone else took me up for aerobatics. We flew upside down. I didn't know which way to push my legs. It was all these amazing experiences I wouldn't have had. Just being comfortable being me and learning to be comfortable being me, and then savoring every minute and choosing joy. You can look at it sadly or you could laugh. And they say you can stay in the darkness or you can light a candle. So I like to light the candle, but since I worry about burning things down, I laugh instead.
I forgot to even mention this. She skis.
Love skiing. Best fun you can have with your clothes on.
Well, maybe it'd be a good time to see if anyone else has questions. There's a mic right there. Anybody want? Oh, okay.
Wait.
Regina.
Regina.
Tell us, what was your assignment in Superior Court that which you found most fulfilling? And tell us about that, please.
Actually, it's what I dreaded, and it's the juvenile criminal court assignment was just eye-opening for me to really see the young people, what they lived with, what they dealt with, what they had to go through just to get to the courthouse, and how smart they were. So often they were knocking their lawyers with their elbows, saying, no, let me talk. Because they knew how to talk their way out of things. And I would say, why did you do that stupid thing? And they'd say, wasn't thinking. And I realized they were telling me the truth. They weren't thinking. And it was just, they were wonderful to learn from and to get a sense of what their life was like. It was real special. Changed me.
And you knew of cases that lives were changed, didn't you? That they came back to you, some of them. I used to, occasionally when we'd be shopping in the Giant, and they had hired a lot of these juvenile, like JDs we used to call them.
They'd kind of freeze when they saw me.
Actually, they
You're
didn't.
my judge.
Actually, they didn't. They came up to her, and the mothers. We run into the mothers anywhere in town, and they would know exactly who she was, and they would thank her so much for how she dealt with their child's case. And it was beyond ones that you could even remember because you had so many. Yeah, that was a good question. Anybody else?
There.
By the way, if you're ever in front of Pat when she's on a wheelchair and there's an incline, get out of the way.
Need for speed.
Thank you so
Thank you.
very much for being here. I'm so inspired by your positivity.
Can you come closer to the?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative that you're here, and I'm interested in learning how you see some of the changes that have taken place in the court system since you've been a judge
Do you mean legally or accessibility?
legally.
Well, as a judge, I am neutral. Everything's wonderful.
Okay, well, I guess we have to get into an area that's less.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. So when I'm reading your bio and it says you had two choices: remain in the safe haven of your parents or reinvent yourself. Was there a particular moment that you can come back to in your memory of when you made that decision, or did it happen overnight, over time?
It was from the very beginning. I loved my parents, but my mom was one of those women who was frustrated by her generation. I mean, there were so many things she wanted to do and couldn't, and she tried to do them through me. And there was, if I stayed home, one of us would have been murdered. So it was real obvious to me that that was the best choice. And they were always really good about making us independent and having us do things on our own. So they gave us the courage and the confidence to be independent and to do that. I had no idea how independent I'd had to be. Let me say that. I mean, I really didn't realize the scope of the decision at the time. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Completely unrelated. So speaking of being impartial, which you were just sharing about a few minutes ago, were there, and knowing that judges who are not in wheelchairs can be both partial and impartial, were there ever any instances where someone tried to argue in front of you that you might not be partial on some maybe disability rights issue because you're in a wheelchair?
Actually, when I was a prosecutor, I tried a case where a gentleman was shot and immediately paralyzed. And I described that in my closing argument. And opposing counsel asked for a new trial because I had used the word paralyzed. And the judge looked at me and said, "Do you want to answer this one?" And I said, they don't know what's wrong with me, Judge. They don't know if I got a broken toe or if I'm paralyzed. And it's got nothing to do with this. And I don't think I should be prohibited from using the English language. So that blew over. But that was really the only time. But then I went back to my office and told them that story, thinking it was hilarious. And my boss kind of went, "Oh." And I could see him thinking, "Oh, God, they're going to appeal all those cases." Unfortunately, they didn't. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That question begs another one, which is during let's see, it was about the time that you had your accident or afterwards. that ADA was passed. Everybody knows what ADA is, I'm sure. And it raises the question of, in your years, have you noticed a great improvement?
Oh, tremendous.
Or do you think there's lots of improvement needed?
Well, there's always more needed, but the access now is just so different. I mean, there really is access now. But in the early years, there was nothing. I mean, every time you got to a curb, you had to get help. It's only a problem now when it snows and they plow all the snow into the curb, and it always takes an extra week to melt. You know? But it's much easier now. I mean, there's still things that can be improved. I will never understand why the wheelchair bathroom is required to have a step-closed bath trash can.
In fact, you had a bit of trouble when you worked at the Treasury Department, where that's where you were prosecuting money laundering, and I think you had other jobs too there. Can you tell us about the entryway there?
The story is in the book, but I went by the main entry of the Treasury building one day, and there were all these pictures of how they were going to do the new entrance. And at that time, I used what I called the separate but equal door, which was the one where all the mail came to, and you had to knock on it. You had to wait for a Secret Service man to come, and then he would open it, and you could go in, and there was no vestibule, so in the rain it could be quite a daunting experience. But then they were going to redo the main entrance, so I went over and looked, and I didn't see any ramp. So I asked if I could talk to someone. So they sent me upstairs, and I said, I see your plans, but I don't see a ramp. They said, oh, no ramp. I said, well, there's got to be a ramp. It's the ADA. They said, oh, no. This is a historic building. We don't have to do that. I said, well, that's an interesting concept, but my understanding is that if you make changes, then you do have to do it. They said, oh, I don't think so. I said, well, that's nice, but I want you to know that I'm going to be leaving the Treasury Department soon. Wouldn't bother me at all to file a lawsuit on my way out. So they called the chief architect. He said, oh, yeah, you got to put in a ramp. So I call it the Patty Broderick Memorial Ramp, but it's not stamped out.
Anybody else want to?
Yep. Hi, Michael.
How are you? So tell the story of I'd Rather Be Dancing.
Oh.
It's one of my favorites.
There was that time when everybody had all those bumper stickers, I'd rather be sailing. Well, I had one that said, I'd rather be dancing, and I had it on the back of my wheelchair. And a lot of people would be stopped by it, and some would stop and take pictures of it. But on my first trial, the lawyer for the defense objected to it. And the judge said, on what grounds? And he said, I feel it's a form of communication with the jury. Overruled.
I've always wanted to know, ever since you told me about this in our Spanish class. So how do you ski in a wheelchair?
I ski in, right now in what's called a bi-ski, but I'm pretty low to the ground. There's 2 skis under me. My feet, my knees are partially bent and feet are up. And there's a suspension system between what we call the seat or the bucket and the skis. And then I have outriggers with little skis on them. And they work like your poles. And it is just a blast. I do have a photo I can show you later.
Showed me the photo,
Yeah.
but I just didn't understand how it all
Yeah.
works. And I'm assuming that's available to other, it's not just your personal.
Correct. I had one of my own, but it was so much trouble to travel with that I just said the heck with it. So you just go to adaptive ski school, and they have them. They have mono skis, bi skis, everything. It's really fun. Hi.
Hello, I'm glad to see you. Two questions. First of all, love the book. Are you going to make a movie out of it?
Me, personally, no.
I recommend it. You could pick the actors to play you at different ages. But seriously, I think it would make a great movie.
Thank you.
My
If you
other-
know someone, let them know.
Gee, I wish. My second question is, do you have tips for women litigators in particular who are surrounded by tall men with booming voices, and how do we get heard? Because I think there's still a glass ceiling there.
I think so too. And the big thing, I think, is not to try to be men.
Yeah.
And also let them see who you are. So, for example, I was always dropping things, right? So I made sure I dropped something during jury selection. And then I picked it up, and they go, oh, all right, she can do it. And so I would do something like that, let them know you're competent and you're not worried about it. One time, I was sent out of the courtroom to check on a witness, and when I came back, I looked down and I had lost a shoe because I had crossed my legs. And I looked up at the judge, and she looked at me strangely and looked at the back door, and the marshal came walking through with my shoe. And I just looked up, I said, it's my Cinderella complex, Judge. So you just got to be you, and don't be afraid, don't let them daunt you. And always be a lady. When they go low, we go high.
Not a 5-letter word. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Judge.
Hi, former
see
law
you.
clerk Liz.
I have a question for you about your legacy. You look at your life or your career through different chapters, and in each chapter there's just accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment, and in different areas. So if there's one thing that you hope your legacy is, whether that's your judgeship or in your personal life, could you speak a little bit about that?
Trust a law clerk to betray you at the last time. I think that the thing I feel the best about is really finally getting comfortable in my own skin and being able to let people be comfortable and see that someone in a wheelchair can be just as nice, just as intelligent, just as rude as anybody else. And I'm proud of that. I have another law clerk here who once told me she was proud one day when I released my inner bitch. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be who I am and not to, kowtow to people's expectations. And I hope that that's an example for people who are different and people who feel they're not different. I think that's what I'm proudest of, following what I believed I was supposed to be doing in this life and doing it, not giving up. Because even with failure, you learn. So it's not failure.
Something you wrote in your book that I think is very thoughtful. You said, you don't let others define you, you show them who you are. How do you do that? I think that's a challenge for all of us.
Well, I think you do it by your actions, and sometimes you do it with your response. Sometimes you do have to correct people. Say, I'm sorry, that's not correct. I mean, you can be nice about it, but it's just really letting people know who you are. You can't expect people to know who you are, what you need. You have to tell them. And I remember once, actually, we were at the Gridiron dinner when we talked to a reporter, Maureen
Dowd?
Buchanan, I think, the beautiful African-American woman. Anyway, she was she had said that that's what her dad taught her is you got to tell them who you are. You can't expect people to know. You have to tell people who you are. And there's a lot of ways to tell people, some by action, some by word, but you have to tell people who you are. So I do. People tell me I don't shut up sometimes. I just keep telling. Is that Dwayne?
You have a question? Come on.
Hi, Judge.
Hi, Dwayne.
I was just wanting to ask you, do you remember when Rudy was having his first child and I had to call for a jury and I missed the cut by about 2 or 3 minutes? And I'm sitting down there saying, how am I going to tell her that we're on the back of the list now? Because we were in the front. And I told her, and she said, today I didn't want to go to trial anyway.
God works in mysterious ways.
I love you, Judge.
I just have a quick question. Are you going to be doing an audiobook? But I'd love for my mother, who's legally blind, to be able to partake.
I haven't been asked. It hasn't been suggested by my publisher. But if you want to let
I think
Rand
that's
Smith
something,
know.
a conversation to your publisher, so to allow the larger audience.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Good idea.
So, well, when I was at the rehab center, I actually also went to the speech therapist to see if I could get rid of the lisp. Didn't work. No. So, if I did an audiobook, I don't know. Maybe we could have Julia Roberts do it.
She could play you in the movie. Well, let's see. Is there anything that I'm missing that you want to talk about that you haven't been able to? I know I know you've left a lot of messages for us all, but is there one that you really most want to leave?
Really, it's just give people a chance and don't underestimate them. There's so much value in everybody, and even people who appear to be unable to do things have other gifts. I mean, when I was in the hospital, I learned that my eyes could go all the way around my head when my neck didn't work so well. There's all kinds of compensation going on. So just give everybody a chance and enjoy who they are for what they are. We shouldn't have low expectations for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
No. And we should all choose who we want to be and not what people tell us we have to be. And like I said, I choose joy. And it's been great. I never thought life could be this good. You have a question?
I was afraid to ask this question, but since you said, don't judge a book by its cover, basically, give everybody a chance. What advice would you give to people of the disability community who have invisible disabilities, who are not in a wheelchair, or not walking with a cane, or, like, for example, somebody who might have comings and goings, like lupus or MS or autism, which does not go away. And there is no cure for it, and nobody knows what causes it. There's no cure. You're just stuck with it, and you have to work with it. And it's very frustrating because we don't have the markers like you do. That, I have a challenge, unless you wear a funny shirt or a hat that's like, you just, and if the person is sensitive enough and they're able to put 2 and 2 together, they'll get it. But most people don't get it.
But you can't expect them to get it.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is and they don't understand.
Right.
It's your job to tell them.
Okay.
So if you need something, you tell them what you need and you tell them why.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to give them a whole dissertation.
Right.
You just say, I need X because Y, and I'm happy to tell you more, but for now, that's what I need.
Thank you.
And just tell them, and it'll free you too. You can't sit around wondering what they're thinking of you. And what do you care what they're thinking of you? You just have a need right now, and you'd like to get it fulfilled. So just tell them what you need and why.
Tell them what you need and why.
Yeah.
And if they...
You can't, what I call magic thing, you can't expect people to kind of know what you want.
Yeah.
You know? And that's true in almost every relationship. Well, gee, I wish you'd buy me a present for my birthday.
Yeah.
Tell them you want a present for your birthday.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, just got to tell them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
hope this was helpful, not just to me, but for anybody where it applies. So thank you. And you're lovely, by the way.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. I'm glad I got a chance to see you.
Thank you.
And you have a wonderful sense of humor. And I'm not an old school person, but I've always felt like I'm a senior citizen at heart, like old wisdom. But what I would tell people sometimes is you lose your sense of humor, you got nothing. Even if you only have a dime in your pocket.
That's right.
You know, you lose your sense of humor, you got nothing. There you go. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be in your presence. Thank you.
Very much.
That was a wonderful question and a wonderful way to come close to the end. I would say the advice you just gave is universal, that we all need to tell, we need to share what it is we need, and when we have challenges, what they are. And this is what you have in spades, and it's great to hear how you have made what is the lemon into lemonade in so many ways, and it's been terrific. I've loved being able to travel with you and watch it in action, and it's been great to read your book, and I hope you all will read it, get a copy, and
We have
Neil
another
has a
question.
question. My husband has a question.
I'm going to horrify my wife by speaking here. I always think it's really wonderful when someone practices what they preach. And I will never forget the night when we were over at your house and you were talking about how great it would be if we lived in an apartment where you could come and visit us. And 6 months later, we moved. And Julia said, this is good. Patty will be able to come and visit us, and this is what we need to do. And, I have to say that I have never, it has been such an extraordinary gift for me to live where we are. And honestly, that conversation we had really prompted us to really think about it. And, you do ask for what you want, and thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.